Welcome back, everybody, to the Graham Fan Podcast. I'm Trey McDaniel, and I'll be your host today. We have another special guest on the show for us, and we're looking forward to kind of highlighting his life and just talking about some of the things that he did growing up, becoming a Graham G man, and kind of some things that he's doing now and his journey along the way. So we'd like to welcome Dr. Hess.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely.
So we'll just start with some of the basics. Where are you originally from?
So I was born in Bluefield, West Virginia,
Okay.
at a hospital that no longer exists.
Yeah.
I grew up in Rocky Gap with my mom and dad. I have two older sisters. So I was kind of the surprise child. So
Okay.
my sisters are, let's see here, 23, 24 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
So my parents had no expectation that they would
Yeah.
be in their late 40s and have
Mhm.
a child, but here I am. So yeah, Rocky Gap was where I started. It's where I started band,
Mhm.
and before I came over to Graham.
Yeah. When did you come over to Graham?
High school.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get into the high school stuff,
Mhm.
you kind of mentioned your parents. Did your parents just get you involved with an instrument or just music in general early on?
Well, it's funny with me. I had a little bit of a hard time kind of finding my lane in
Okay.
life. My dad is good at everything. He's somebody that could just kind of read a book about how to build a house and then go out back and build a house.
Okay. He's one. Okay.
And I had never have been quite like that.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for me to find a lane. And one of the things that my parents always loved and respected, and they're very religious people, is they loved church music.
Okay.
And so it was kind of a way for me to find a lane in my family. Like this was kind of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, they really supported me. Especially, early on you have to buy the instrument, which of course,
It'd be
you don't.
expensive.
Yeah, and I wasn't Dr. Carl Hess back then,
Right,
so
right,
nobody
right.
knew that I was going to do it for the rest of my
Mhm.
life. So there was quite an expense in it. I had originally played the guitar.
Okay. Is that your first instrument?
Yeah, that was my
Okay.
first, and I wasn't very good. And I talked to my dad, and I said, I really want to play the trumpet.
Hmm.
And he said, well, once you master the guitar, you can play the trumpet.
Okay.
And so I played the guitar. Again, I still
Mhm.
haven't mastered it, but thankfully he relented and bought me a trumpet. But then from that, taking me for lessons because around here you have to travel to do anything.
Right, right.
So taking me up to Virginia Tech for trumpet
Mhm.
lessons and all that kind of stuff. So they were very supportive.
What age range were you when you got your first trumpet?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's been a lot of hours into
A
this
lot
thing.
of hours.
Obviously.
Well, they say it takes 10,000 hours
Okay.
to actually become really professional at anything.
Okay.
And I kind of buy that.
Okay.
I think it, you can have the best teachers, but it just takes time.
Yeah.
Time to do it.
So by the time you graduated high school,
Mhm.
how many instruments could you play?
Well, that's an interesting story. So in high school, my plan was to become a symphony orchestra trumpet player.
Okay.
So I was going to move to Chicago
Mm-hmm.
and be the first trumpet in the Chicago Symphony,
Okay.
and that was what my plan was.
Yeah.
So I could play a little bit of piano back then and trumpet, and that was it. And it wasn't. I always say that necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Okay.
So once you have to do something, then suddenly you figure out a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So during COVID is actually when I started picking up pretty much every instrument because I had access. I was teaching college, and I had access to any instrument I wanted. So I would just go to the college every week, take a different instrument,
Yeah.
and learn
Cool.
to play it. So
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So back when you were a student here, who was the band director back then?
Mike Brown.
Okay, and he's great. He was my band director
Yes.
too.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of numbers did you guys have back then?
So it seems like my freshman year we had about 120,
Okay.
and it kind of went up and down from there.
Yeah.
I think maybe senior year it was maybe in the 80s, 90s,
Okay.
something like that.
So if you've ever been to Graham High School and you've been around the band room, you might see a picture of a younger gentleman, but that's you. So what's that picture all about?
Well, so that was from my junior year. So in music, it's a little bit different than it is in sports. So you have to do all district band,
Mhm.
and if you are in the top, I think it is maybe the top 4 in your district,
Mm-hmm.
you get to audition for all state.
Okay.
And so then I went to all state auditions at JMU, and I actually got first chair in the orchestra. And so I think that was the first time up until that point that I'm aware
Mm-hmm.
that anybody had made all state. So
Okay.
that's why I have a funny story about that picture. When I first came
Yeah.
here, I was walking by and there were these two people, and they were looking up at the picture. I don't know if I ever
Yeah.
told you this, but
Uh-uh.
and they were just kind of gazing at it. And I looked up and I said, "Man, that guy is ugly."
Yeah.
And they looked at me. They were offended, and I was like, "Wait, it's me."
Yeah.
So they're like, "Okay,"
Yeah.
but yeah,
Um, that's great. So talking about like the 10,000 hours to become a professional.
yeah,
And if you haven't heard him play trumpet, then I mean you're missing out. You've probably heard him if you go to the football games,
yeah.
especially. You've probably heard him. Might not have known that it was him, but ultra talented. But what was your schedule like back then? I mean, were you putting in a whole bunch of extra hours with the trumpet?
Yeah, I was fortunate that I didn't have to work. So I basically went to school and band, and that's all I did. I
Yeah.
mean, band was my identity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were some people that did multiple things, but at least for me, I band was
Yeah.
kind of everything for me. So yeah, I would say that typically what would happen is I would get to school early, and it was a little different back then. So I would go to the band room and practice,
Hmm.
and then we would have school, and then afterwards, our practices were in the evening. So I'd go home. I would probably get in about 2 or 3 hours before band practice,
Okay.
have band practice for 2 hours, and then by then I was pretty much done for the day.
Okay. All
So
right. So
yeah,
yeah. So lots of hours.
yeah.
So any other memories of being a student here, rather than just being a student or being in the band?
Hmm.
Just any memories that really stand out to you? For me, I know I always, if anytime I think about the high school days, I always think of band camp,
Mm,
especially.
mm.
But anything like that for you?
Yeah. So obviously, band camp was special. Um, it's hard to sometimes it's hard to get the students to understand now that adversity
Mm-hmm.
produces perseverance,
Yeah.
which is what you
Yeah.
need, right? And so when you put a group of kids in a band camp situation, especially when you go away, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult, it's hot, there's a lot
Yes.
of expectations on
Hmm.
them, and especially, did you have Willie? Was he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Willie was uh, kind of a different kind in
He
a
was
lot of ways.
adversity in
Yeah,
himself,
that's
really.
right. That's right. But it was great because Mr. Brown. It was good cop, bad cop. I didn't know that at the time,
Yeah.
but Mr. Brown was the good cop,
Yeah.
and he'd walk around, pat you on the back. It's
Hmm.
okay. You do better next time. Meanwhile, Willie was ripping you to shreds.
Yeah.
But that produced perseverance,
Yeah.
um, and you start to learn more about yourself when you go through
Absolutely.
difficult times. So that was a big thing. I would say also just the overall climate, the culture at Graham was very welcoming to musicians, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was for everybody, but obviously Graham has always been a football powerhouse,
Right. Yeah.
pretty much since it was built. But I remember, Coach Carlock, he seemed to have a lot of respect for me. He was my guidance counselor,
Hmm.
being a trumpet player. I mean,
Yeah.
he kind of resonated with that because there are a lot of similarities between band and football,
Hmm. More
and
more than people know.
more than people know. And I have a story about Coach Carlock. Remind me if I don't tell it.
Okay.
Um, but so yeah, I would say that Graham just allowed me to kind of blossom into, or at least start blossoming into what I was going to become without there being any kind of like, oh, you're a band geek, or like
Yeah.
I literally I had never heard that term until college.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that just was not a thing here.
Yeah.
And so
Well, I mean, I think you kind of answered some of those questions, but I mean, one question I had written down to kind of highlight that family aspect within this community, and it sounds like just the nurturing and the
mhm.
growing up kind of maybe might have helped establish that sense of family
Mhm.
for you
Mhm.
at that age. So in the high school time, so once you left Graham and graduated, where'd you go to college?
So I did my undergrad at Alderson Broaddus, and it was a small school in West Virginia. But man, they had a powerhouse music
Yeah.
program.
Okay.
Um, and it was one of those things that we've looked back over the years, like, how did this happen? And I think it was just the professors there worked really hard to cultivate it.
Hmm.
But it was an amazing opportunity, and I learned so much. Did my master's at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh,
Okay.
and the main reason I went to Pittsburgh was, I grew up in Rocky Gap.
Hmm.
We have more cows than people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went to AB in West Virginia, which maybe had a few more people than cows.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I want to really become a professional
Hmm.
trumpet player, I need to be in a city,
Hmm.
and I need to really study with somebody who does this every day.
Yeah.
And so I did. I went to Duquesne
Okay.
and studied there, and then my doctorate at JMU.
Okay. So what all did you get your degrees in?
So the first two were in trumpet performance,
Okay.
and my doctorate is in conducting
Okay.
and in pedagogy,
Okay.
so teaching.
Um, so this is kind of down further on the list. Have you played anywhere really cool
Yeah,
over the years?
yeah. I've had the opportunity to tour Europe. I actually
Wow.
trying to think of all the places I went. Um, Paris. We went to Italy. We went to Germany,
Wow.
Austria.
Wow.
So we did tours there. I've toured up in Canada,
Okay.
and those are always fun concerts because there's just something about when you have even with Canada. I mean, it's essentially, it's still North America, right? So
Right.
it's
Sure.
essentially very
Yeah.
similar cultural concepts, but it's still different.
Yeah.
Americans are still different than Canadians,
Hmm.
and so just getting warm receptions from all of those places. I've also been able to play with the Pittsburgh Opera and some pretty historic performances and stuff like that. So a lot of cool things.
Yeah. Yeah. No joke. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't know you actually like toured through Europe and
yeah,
everything. So
yeah,
I bet that was a lot of fun.
yeah. It was.
Any memories from your college days? Just any professors stand out to you? Or...
Yeah, I've had several professors, and it's interesting that different professors have a different role in your life depending on
Yeah.
where you are, right? What's going on in your
Hmm.
own life. And so I remember uh, Dr. Judd Bracey, my undergrad. He is the most brilliant man I've ever seen, and he was able he could teach you to do anything.
Yeah.
And he was the kind of guy that if you walked by him and said, talk to me about string theory,
Yeah.
he could have a 45-minute conversation with you about string
Mm.
theory without any type of preparation. I
Yeah.
mean, he's just that kind of mind.
Hmm.
But sometimes people that are that brilliant aren't always great communicators, but he
Yeah.
was. He
Okay.
had both, and so he really impacted me in terms of what I wanted to become as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you how many times that I have thought, essentially, what would Dr. Bracey do
Hmm.
in this situation?
Okay.
So he was a big thing. In my doctorate, my conducting teacher, Steve Bolstad, um, great teacher, great conductor, but he was probably the most positive person
Mm.
that I've ever met, and I needed that at that particular moment in my
Yeah.
life. I just needed somebody that, when I went into a lesson, it was, this is going to be great,
Yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to,
Cool.
because in music you can get into the tear down pretty quick,
Definitely. Yeah.
and so he was very much a build you up kind of guy. So I would say those two specifically, but there have been many.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Cool. So where else before we get into kind of your time at Graham being the band director?
Hmm.
Where else have you been along your journey from uh, post Duquesne days
Hmm.
to now?
Well, so I told you that my initial desire was to become a professional trumpet player,
Yeah.
and so during the second semester of my second year in
Hmm.
graduate school, um, I got to the point where every time I played, I was in intense pain.
Yeah.
I felt like knives were going in my
Hmm.
my chops, and so it became apparent to me. I didn't know what was going on. It turns out it was overuse syndrome,
Okay.
which we get all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Hmm.
But if you think about it, I mean, when you're playing 8 hours a day, like the body was not meant to play the trumpet,
Right. Right.
right? And so because it was not meant to play the trumpet, there are negative consequences,
Hmm.
And so that's been a whole journey that I've been on to kind of
Yeah.
relearn how to play correctly and more
Hmm.
efficiently and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So anyway, I kind of looked at my life and I said, okay, I went through college,
Hmm.
went through graduate school. Uh, I need to get a job,
Yeah.
right?
That helps.
It helps, and it's kind of the point of school.
Yeah.
But sometimes musicians, especially, I know people that went all the way through to get a doctorate before they ever worked.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, real work, like career work.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought, well, and I can't. I was like, this is not working for me. Trumpet play's not working. So somebody said this to me, and I can't remember who said it, but I would say this has been one of the biggest life lessons that I ever learned.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me, said, "What makes a great running back?" I said, "I don't speed.
Yeah.
What I said, "No, great running back sees a hole and runs as fast as he can through it."
Yeah.
Right. And that was a game changer for me
Yeah.
in the sense of like, don't try to force yourself into a career. See what's available.
Yeah.
And if you see a door open, walk through it.
Yeah.
So to that end, as I was graduating, one of the conductors at Duquesne was leaving. And so I talked to the director of bands and I said, "Do you think this is something that I could do?" Now, I want you to understand, I had absolutely zero experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. And long story short, he said yes. I ended up applying for the job. I got the job and became, at the age of 23, I became a full-time professor.
Wow.
Which is, it was great in a lot of ways, but it was extremely challenging too.
Yeah.
Because, I had, if you think about it, in a school that has master's and doctoral students, some of your doctoral students might be in their 50s.
Yeah.
So you've got this 23-year-old kid up there telling you what to do. It was, there was a learning curve for everybody.
Yeah.
But that taught me a lot about myself. And because I had gotten to the point, like, things weren't going well that first year when I took that job, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I had been asked to pick up a famous conductor from the airport and bring him to his hotel. And so I did. And I said, "Maestro, could I ask you a very personal question?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Sure." And I said, "Have you ever gotten to the point as a conductor where you thought to yourself, I am so bad, I should just go sell used cars or,
Yeah.
just forget it all?" And he said, "Well, I've gotten it down to about once a week."
Oh,
And that changed my life too,
okay.
because then I realized, okay,
It's normal.
it's normal. Like,
Yeah.
this is, you go through these type of things. So anyway, I was at Duquesne for 5 or 6 years. While I was at Duquesne, I also performed and taught privately and all that kind of stuff. Then I left to get my doctorate, and while I was doing my doctorate, obviously teaching at JMU, but also I taught at Bridgewater College, which wasn't very far from JMU. And then after I graduated, I went up to Moravian, now University,
Okay.
which is right outside of New York City, in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that was a great experience. And actually, every experience that I've had, there was something about that job that I was kind of clueless about. And like I told you, I wasn't planning on becoming a band director.
Right.
So when I took the job at Moravian, it had a marching band, and I had never directed a marching band. Now this is breaking news. Okay, nobody knew that. And they said, they didn't ask me, "Have you ever done it?" They said, "Can you do this?" And I said, "Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, I can." And I learned so much, and the kids were really great. I don't think they realized that I was learning with them. But yep. So then, obviously, from Moravian, came back here, was at Bluefield Middle, and now I'm back at Graham.
What made you come back this direction?
So my parents, I told you I was a little bit of a surprise, and if you're a surprise and you fast forward 40 years, you're going to be in your 80s. And so my parents are doing well, but I think they needed a little bit of help.
Yeah.
And so my wife, who is probably the greatest woman in the world, suggested that we move back here and take care of my parents and raise our kids here. And so we have 4 kids, and that was really the big impetus to kind of come back. And also, it was during COVID, and I'll just be honest with you, being up around New York City during COVID, I had no interest in that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So at least in this area, we felt like, okay, we've got a little bit of land. We can walk around, plant a garden if we need to.
Right.
So it really has been a wonderful, wonderful change for us.
Yeah. So this is your second year,
Second year.
right? So far, I know it's still kind of um, new, but what's been some of the best memories? I mean, you talk about all these great memories from
Hmm.
everywhere you've been. You've had such an interesting walk in life.
Hmm.
I've learned a lot of this just today. It's super cool.
Hmm.
But what's been some of the best memories since you've been here at Graham?
I think, and I know you want to talk a little bit about this, but I think that when war started to bubble
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
which I was totally unaware of because I wasn't on social media, so
Oh,
I
right.
didn't. Mr. Buckner came to me one day. He's like, "Oh, that chant's really causing a stir." I didn't even know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I don't like a lot of attention,
Hmm.
but the idea that music and specifically the Big G band was helping to bring people together,
Yes.
and I think that really is the function of music is community
Mm-hmm.
building,
Yeah.
and um, and I don't think that there's anything else really that can do it like music can.
Hmm.
And watching, I especially with the kids, because when we started, um, when we played Graham Beaver my first year, you know, we got a couple claps,
Yeah. Yeah.
and by the end of the season, people were surrounding the band with their phones out,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's got to make you feel
yeah,
great.
especially for the
And
kids,
definitely.
because they felt like I don't want to say they felt like rock stars, but the idea of like, wow,
Yeah.
we must be doing something
Yeah.
the right way,
Yeah.
and they were. So I would say that that's probably the best memory. But like I said, not for any kind of like fame, but just I think that really brought people together.
I
You
think
know.
I remember last year. I mean, I was at the house. I mean, it'd be April on a Tuesday afternoon, and I
Hmm.
would just randomly start singing it.
Yeah.
So it was stuck in my head. I was actually, whenever I was up in my classroom earlier, I was actually kind of looking around, and I actually saw, there's a cup that says you don't want to go to war with the
Hmm.
G-men.
Hmm.
And then I started playing around on my computer. I looked down at my mouse, and my mouse pad says,
Hmm.
"You don't want to go to war with the G-men."
Right.
And I look over at my filing cabinet, and there's a
The
sticker
sticker
right
on there that
there.
says you don't want to go to war. Yeah.
And I remember just, yeah, just that war chant
Hmm.
and the success with the football team
Hmm.
as well. It really did bring. I felt like it really brought the whole community together.
Yeah.
Um, and I still sing it. I'm singing it right now in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. It's been
Yeah.
such a cool um, addition. It's something for people to talk about. Um,
And let me just say this too,
yeah.
and I think it worked perfectly with our band because and this is not a quality judgment, right? This is
Hmm.
good and that's bad, but there are some bands that they're very competition based, right?
Hmm.
Like they spend thousands and
Yeah.
thousands on shows and do
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. I mean, our primary responsibility, in my opinion, is to support our teams,
Yeah.
and I think that you see that and you hear that when you
Hmm.
hear the band.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think that is so important. Like I said, just for that community building.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that is why, in my opinion, Graham is different than so many other places. A
Right.
lot of great schools in the world, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But it's much more than just academics.
Yeah.
And I think that the people that have invested in Graham High School over the years,
Hmm.
that have spent decades giving,
Hmm.
because that's what I mean. We could name them, but I mean, you don't do this for the money,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But they have invested in the students and they've invested in the culture, and I think that that's why it's so special.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And kind of like I was mentioning to you, you guys might not have seen them play, but you probably heard them in that war chant because you get up there and play, and man, it's loud.
Yeah.
It is loud, and the band does sound great. And I've noticed even going to some of these concerts. I've been the last since you've been here. I've been going to these end of the year concerts, spring concerts,
Hmm.
and the sound of the band improved so much.
Mm.
I mean, just throughout the year, and that's a testament to you, and I think it's a testament to the kids too.
Yeah.
So I mean, we are super lucky to have you at Graham
Well.
High School. But I know outside of Graham High School, you're still pretty busy. So you
Yeah.
teach at Bluefield
I
University.
teach at Bluefield University as well. I'm an adjunct professor
Hmm.
there, so I teach trumpet,
Okay.
and it's kind of cool. So the young lady I teach is actually a graduate of Graham High School. So it's kind of nice because over time, I potentially could have somebody from sixth grade all the way up through
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's nice. It's busy, and especially in marching band season, usually they come to me rather than
Yeah.
me driving to, because it's just
Hmm.
so hectic, especially with
Right.
kids and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to the sports, people really uh, are just more aware of how many football players go to the next level,
Hmm.
how many basketball players go to the next level, volleyball, whatever. But there's a lot of kids that are going and playing
Hmm.
at these different colleges. I mean, I know Bluefield University. I was at a game a couple weeks ago. I want to say I saw a handful of Graham
Hmm.
students,
Hmm.
and that's great too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know how many you have playing the college? I mean, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
I don't know an exact number. I will say that we have, to tell you how significant Graham is. So in Tazewell County,
mm-hmm.
2/3 of the band directors are Graham High graduates,
Oh, okay,
and
there we go.
so that's not accidental, I
Yeah,
don't think.
yeah,
And but yeah, absolutely. The kids participate. We have students that maybe they don't major in music; they're going to
mm-hmm.
major in something else, but they play in the marching band or they play in the concert band. And we also every year we have a couple that actually major in music, and
Yeah,
so those students I actually give them a little bit of a like kind of a workshop, or I don't know what you want to call it, but anyway,
yeah,
I meet with them, kind of get them a little bit prepped
mm-hmm.
for what they're about to experience in school
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's very different.
You're the man to ask for
Yeah.
on that one. So, when it comes to creating musicians,
Hmm.
maybe creating is a bad word, but teaching
Hmm.
for that musicianship.
Hmm.
Sorry, I can't talk.
That's right.
Um, how difficult is that? What's the process like on that? Because I mean, there's all this music reading, but then I know with trumpet, there's certain
Hmm.
things that you shapes that you have to form with your
Embouchure and yeah.
yes. How difficult is all of that?
It's incredibly difficult. I mean, it's one of those things that it is so easy it's difficult
Hmm.
because once you understand it, it's just like anything else, right? It's
Yeah,
like a golf swing. I
yeah,
mean, at least the first time I tried to swing a golf club, it was terrible.
yeah,
It's not hard, right?
yeah.
It's just you have to understand the mechanics of it
Right.
and be able to do it.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing with trumpet or anything else. Um, what I have found, and it depends on the age of the student. So if I'm working with a sixth grader, that's different because all of them are in the same place, right?
Hmm.
But like with the high school band, we have some kids that are getting ready to major in music, and we have some kids that are struggling with fingering still or whatever.
Hmm.
The big thing that I have found to be true is make it fun. If it's fun, you learn.
Right. Yeah.
And if you make somebody feel bad or you embarrass them or whatever, then nobody learns that way. At least I don't learn that way.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons I play so much with the kids is music is oral, right?
Right.
Now, yes, you have written music, like there's a visual component to it, but it's primarily happening here.
Hmm.
And so you can talk about how to make a great trumpet sound for
Right.
months.
Yeah. But to
But
hear
but
it.
if you pick your trumpet up and you say no, play it like this,
Hmm.
then there's that instantaneous connection.
Yeah.
And in fact, I even we don't need to get into the body physics, but the way the eardrums are made in the skull and all of that, it actually it sounds more accurate if you get behind the student and play
Okay.
towards them. So I'll get behind the students and play like this is how I want you to articulate this note or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I found that to be the easiest thing. And I'd say the biggest thing is lighting a fire.
Yeah.
So my goal is to light fires
Hmm.
in these kids
Yeah.
because once you light that fire, chances are it's going to
Yeah.
be all encompassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I found that to be true. I've had a couple students here that maybe they started, it was pretty rough, and I really invested in them trying to light a
Yeah.
fire, and now they're just
They're
cooking,
rocking. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that's always good as a teacher to feel like, okay,
Oh
that's
yeah, definitely. So what's some of your biggest goals right now, whether it be middle school band, high school band? What's some of the biggest goals you have right now?
well. So I think it's all connected. I think we want to get the numbers up.
Yeah.
That it's always especially in the arts, it's a numbers game, right?
Hmm.
Because numbers. It seems to a lot of people that numbers equate health,
Yeah.
right? If you've got, like when I was at JMU, we had 520 people in the marching band.
Yeah.
I mean, people went nuts. Now, not all 520 people could play at the same level,
Right.
But the look of that many people participating, looked great. It's not always true that means it's really healthy, but numbers is a big part. And I think that, taking it from the middle school, I think in 8th grade currently I've got I think 7 students. In 7th grade I think I've got 12, and in 6th grade I've got 48.
Okay.
So if I
Awesome.
can continue that, now we're not going to retain all 48 kids,
half of them,
but even half of them. I mean, because half of 6 is not good, right?
Sure.
But half of 48, suddenly now you've got
that's a big senior class.
It's a big senior class,
Absolutely.
So,
for the rest of you guys, if you have a student come up to the coming into the middle school, obviously they are learning from probably the person you want them to learn from. So we encourage you to get your kids interested in some music and get them into the band program early. We want to thank you, Dr. Hess, for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. Can I tell the Coach Carlock story real quick?
I'm sorry.
This is a good way to close.
Yeah.
My dad's a preacher, so I always have a strong close. So Coach Carlock was obviously a football coach here. Can't remember how many years, many years.
Right.
And he was also a guidance counselor, and so that's how I knew him. Obviously, I didn't play football, but and he was always kind of giving me these nuggets that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And the thing that has stuck with me the most is he told me one time, he said, "Carl, I don't coach football." And I looked at him.
Obviously you do, right?
Obviously you're the football coach. And he said, "I coach men."
Okay.
And I've actually thought about that consistently for the last 23 years.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, some of his players went to the NFL.
Yeah.
Some of his players played in college. But most of them didn't.
Yeah.
But all of them have lives.
Yeah.
That I think they would tell you that he positively contributed to. And so thinking like that, like I'm not trying to build a band program. I'm trying to help. I'm only a part of it, right? They've got their family, you got other teachers and all that, church, whatever. But I want to be a part of helping them get ready for life, because life's not always easy.
Yeah, no joke. That's a pretty good close. So, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, we thank you, and stay tuned for the next one.
Thanks, sir.
Fumble on the play.